In this tutorial, we will implement custom cache to load data faster. Here we have our API which returns all employees' data from database. And that's how the response is being received. First we will show it in Recycler view. We have already set up an Android project, and you must add these libraries in your Gradle. We have Design Card View, Recycler View, Volley Gson and Stetho. To send API request we need add an internet permission in our manifest file. And to view SQLite data we need to use the Stetho library. We have already included it in Gradle file, so now we need to initialize it. Create a new class, and extend it from Android application class. In its onCreate method, we will initialize the Stetho library. Initialize with defaults, and pass this class as context. Then tell the Android manifest to use this class as application by giving name attribute to application tag. Now we will create a Recycler view to display all data. Create a Recycler view tag, and give it a unique ID. And get this in your activity. Find view by ID. Set the Recycler view size to fixed. And create a linear layout manager. And set this as layout of Recycler view. Now create a new adapter for this Recycler view. We are creating a new package for it. And this must extend from Recycler view adapter. Create a nested class for view holder. And this must extend from Recycler view holder. Generate a constructor for it, press Alt plus Enter. And set this view holder in this adapter's generic class. And generate its method too by pressing Alt plus Enter. First create a constructor of this adapter. And pass context and array list of data models. Data models will be the type of data you are receiving from API. So create a new class. And you can place all your variables here. For simplicity we are placing just one. And generate its getter and setter methods. And pass this model class in ArrayList. And we also need to create these variables in class. Make them both private, and assign the constructor values to this class data members. And here we need to tell the layout which will be used by this adapter. Layout inflator, from context. An inflate will tell the file, so we need to create a new layout. Call it single employee. The width will be full and set the height to just 100 so it will not cover the full screen. We only want to display the name here, so just create one text view. And add this and inflate. Second parameter will be parent. We will set this as view group. And final is attached to root, which we set to false. And this will return the view object. Since this method return type is view holder, so we will create a new object and pass this view as parameter. We will discuss this bind view later. And here we need to place the size of data which we are receiving in ArrayList. And we need to get this text view inside view holder class. So create an object and initialize it using item view. Now on bind view holder, we are receiving view holder object. We will get the text view using that view holder, and set its text value. We are getting the values in our model's array. And we can get its using this second parameter. Similarly, you can display all other values here as per your need. Now we need to create this adapter class object in our activity and assign it to recycler view. First parameter will be context, and second will be array list of models. So create a new data member for array list, of type employee model. And initialize it before sending in parameter. And set the adapter to recycler view. Now we need to create a function which will call an API request and fetch all the data from database. Function name will be getData. Call it after setting the adapter. First tell the path of API and save it in a string variable. This is the complete path. And for sending API request we will be using Volley library. So create a new Volley request. And pass this activity as context. This will return a request queue type object, save it in a variable. Now create a simple string request. This will send the request and return the response as string. First parameter is method which is get. And second is the URL of API. And third will be function called when the response is received. It also has a fourth function which will be called if there is any error in the request, for example if the server is not found. We will add a simple log in error function and attach a debugger, so we will know if there is any problem in the request. Also place the log in response function to see if we are receiving correct response. And attach a debugger too. Now Volley has a default cache mechanism but we want to implement custom cache, so we can set the expiry time as we want it. So we will disable the Volley's cache. And add this request to Volley queue. This will call the API request. We already have an Android device attached for testing, but to view in here, we are using Screen Copy Command Line tool. The link of it will be mentioned in the description. Simply call this command, scrcpy. This is our device. Now run it in debugger mode. You will see after a few seconds the response will be received. So the response has been received correctly. Now we need to convert this response in our array list of models. So create a try-catch block because it might throw an exception. We will be using Gson library for converting JSON text into models array. Create an instance of it. And for converting array, we need to use the type class. The object type will be type class, and we should create an instance of type token class. And pass the array list of employee models in it. As the type token is a generic class, so we need to create a block of it, and call the getType method. Now we can convert our string to array list using this type object. Call from JSON function from Gson object. First parameter will be string which needs to be converted and second will be of type. This will return an array list of employee model class. Now we need to create a separate function which will load this data in our adapter. We are creating separate function because it will be called multiple times. And call this function after response has been converted into array list. To update the adapter from this function, we need to create a new function in adapter class. Call it setFilter. And the argument will be array list of new data. First we are going to remove all current data in array. Then we will add the new data. And update the adapter by calling notifyDataSetChanged. Now call this function from our ActivityShowData function. And pass the array list in it. When the data is being loaded from API it will take some seconds, but loading data from cache will be loaded immediately. So we need to create a simple progress bar to see when the data is being loading from API and when from cache. Create a progress bar in Activity Layout. Make it center. Give it a unique ID. Create an instance of it. Initialize it using ID. By default, the progress bar is visible, so we need to hide it when the data will be displayed. Set the visibility to gone. Again start the screen copy to mirror the device. So this is the data being received from API, and you can see the progress bar for few seconds because each time it is fetching data from API. Most of the time, same data will be returned so we can save it in cache. To save data in cache, we will be using SQLite database. Create a new class, SQLite Manager. Extend it from SQLite Open Helper. Implement the methods by pressing Alt plus Enter. Create a constructor for this class. and pass the context in it. Call the superconstructor. Here we will set the database name and version. This will be the database name. And this is factory, we set this to null. And the version is 1. In onCreate, we will create the database tables. Create in SQL query. We will be creating a table named employees and with only one column. Execute the query by calling exec_SQL from DB object. On upgrade will be called whenever you change the version of database. So whenever the version of database changes, we will remove old tables and all data in them. And create new ones by calling on create method. The DB object will remain same. In this class, we also need to create a function for adding data in SQLite database. The parameter will be model class. Create a new instance of SQLite database. Get writable database. In SQLite, data has been saved using content values. Create a new content value object. And put all values in it using key value pair. And to create a new row in database, call the insert function from database object. First parameter will be table name. Second will be null so that it will add an empty row if no value is provided. And third will be our content value we just created. Finally close the database. And in activity, after the response is received, save it in SQLite. Loop through all records. Create an SQLite Manager object. And initialize it. And inside the loop, call the addData function and pass the each row using index. If you have Stetho enabled, we will be able to see the data using Chrome Inspect tools. Run the app in debug mode. Now click on Inspect of your app. Go to Resources tab, then in your database name. Here you see all your tables. And here is how the data is being saved in SQLite. Now we need to create a function to get all data saved in SQLite. Return type will be ArrayList. Create a new ArrayList and return it. Get the SQLite database object as done before. Execute the query to get all data from employees table. No need to pass any argument, so set this to null. This will return a cursor which will help to loop through each record. First check if cursor has any record. Then run the do-while loop, because when we call move to first function, we already have the first row. And the termination should be until the cursor gets empty. Create a new model instance. and assign all values here. We can get the value from cursor using its index. And add this model in ArrayList. In activity on create, before calling getData. Get the data from SQLite and save it in another ArrayList. And check if there is any record in cache. If there is any record in cache, then we will display it from cache, otherwise from API. Replace our model's array with cache array and call the showData function, which will set this data to adapter and hide the progress bar. Uninstalling the app to remove all cached data. Now you will see the first time it takes a few seconds to load the data, but then the data will be loaded instantaneously. This is loaded from API and saved in cache. And this is loaded from cache. You can see how fast this is. Now once the data is saved in cache, it will remain in cache until the app will be uninstalled. But we need to set some expiry time so that the cache will be expired after some time and new data can be fetched. For this purpose, we will be using shared preference. Create a shared preference instance. And initialize it using Preference Manager. Get default shared preference, and send this as context. After the data is saved in cache, we are going to save the current time in shared preference. Data type must be long since the time is in milliseconds. And apply will save the data in shared preference. Here we also need to check if data exists in cache and the cache is not expired. Create a Boolean variable and set its default value to false. And get the time saved in cache. Default value is 0. First check if the time is greater than 0, which means that the time has some actual value. Then get the current time. Then get the difference between current time and the time when data was cache. Since this time is in milliseconds, so we need to convert it into seconds by dividing by 1000. And here you can set your own time in seconds. For example, I will expire the cache after 20 seconds, so I will check if 20 seconds has passed. And put the condition here. If cache is not expired, then display data from cache. Uninstalling the app again. This is the data from API. And this is from cache. Now it will keep displaying the data from cache for 20 seconds, after that it will again fetch the data from API. Now the only problem remaining is, the data is being appended whenever a new data is fetched from database. You can check here it is again adding the rows. So what we will do is to create a function to delete all rows from that table. And call this function before saving the data in SQLite database. Now cached data will be removed before saving new data in SQLite database. So that's all in saving the data in cache using SQLite database. Of course you will be implementing this in your own project and you might have a different scenario. So if you have any problem, feel free to ask in the comments section below.